Donald Trump has been in office for a little over a month and a lot has happened. So let's stop and rank some of his administration's best and worst actions since taking office. Howdy, I'm Catherine Mangue-Ward, editor-in-chief of Reason, the magazine of free minds and free markets, and I'm here with Nick Gillespie, editor-at-large of Reason.
Hi, Catherine. How you doing?
Nick, you go first. What's the best thing Trump's done?
For me, hands down, the one unalloyed good thing that Trump has done was pardon Ross Ulbricht, the founder of the Silk Road dark website where people could buy and sell drugs using Bitcoin. Back in the early teens, Trump had promised at the Libertarian National Convention last summer to commute Ross's double life sentence. Reason has been involved in this case, since the beginning. The Silk Road was the first real kind of use test case of Bitcoin. Ross was over sentenced, to say the least. So it's good to see Trump not only come through on his promise to pardon, but to commute Ross's sentence, he actually pardoned him and then put in a lot of harsh words for all the evil people at the deep state that Trump is now trying to disassemble or kick out of office. But so for me, it's the pardoning of Ross Ulbricht.
Trump keeps talking about how he really understands about politically motivated and unfair prosecutions. And every time he does that, I'm like, you can hear that you're saying both things, right? Like he understands in the sense that he has done it and will do it. And he also understands in the sense that he perceives himself to have been a victim of it.
Yeah, this is the thing that is maddening about Trump is that even when he does something right, he somehow will never hold the pure thought or the moral high ground for very long. He'll immediately get down in the mud. But in any case, this was a promise made and better than that, a promise kept by pardoning him, not just commuting the sentence.
Yeah, and he did explicitly say, I am doing this because, more or less, I promised the libertarians I would, and for his mom. And I do want to just say, the moment that we learned that Ulbricht was going to be freed, my first thought was of Lynn, who is she is superhuman in her efforts to get to this moment. And, such an exemplar of somebody who just did the kind of dogged work every single day of righting injustice, and the fact that the injustice was so close to her heart obviously powered her, but kind of a
no, it hopefully, this will have ramifications longer than that. Earlier this year, for the first time in my life, I went to Rome and I went to the Vatican and I saw the Pieta, the Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, holding the dead Jesus. And I think Lynn Ulbricht is that kind of mother figure who really, was there for her son in every way, shape, or form. And she's the reason why all of this ultimately happened. And most importantly, there were a lot of sloppy things about Ross's prosecution. There was a bullshit added on idea that he had done, hired or tried to contract murders for hire on rivals and things like that were immediately dropped. The Ross Ulbricht case, and I think this is why we were interested in it from the beginning, is that it's about drug policy, it's about Bitcoin, but ultimately it's about, people being able to buy and sell what they want voluntarily with better information than they get on the black market or on the current, free market in pharmaceuticals. So again, Trump did the right thing here.
Yeah, I'll also just put in a little advance kind of preview of in the next issue, we have a piece by Billy Binion on acquitted conduct sentencing. It's not exactly what happened in this case, but this sort of thing that happens far too often where someone is accused of a bunch of stuff, in some cases acquitted, maybe at the state and local level, maybe at the federal level, of certain charges. And then the fact that they were tried for or accused of those charges is still used against them in the sentencing for something that they are found guilty of. In this case, it was much more kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge by implication, but still just wrong, just very, very wrong, and not how our justice system should conduct itself.
I guess Trump is the only convicted felon as president, but, he did
so
sign.
Far.
Yeah, that's right. We can hope, right? He's the first of an inexhaustible list, but he signed the First Step Act. He, Jared Kushner's father, had been convicted of felonies. He knows the criminal justice system in a way, and it's it would be easy to be like, oh well, he's horrible in that sense, but he actually did bring some criminal justice reform in a way that doesn't often happen. And you take. I mean, I think this is the thing about Trump. I don't know if you ever played Pokemon, but there's a character named Psyduck who is very powerful but is insane. And so, like, whenever you bring him out into the match, you might win, or more likely something is going to explode and everybody dies. And Trump is our Psyduck, and sometimes it works out pretty well.
The pieta to Pokemon trajectory of your answers here, I did not expect, and I
apologize for that.
My answer to this question is Doge, obviously. Yeah. What has Trump done that I don't hate? It's Doge. Elon Musk and Javier Milei sharing a chainsaw at CPAC is definitely a thing I have had a dream about, and I wasn't sure whether it was a nightmare or what, but I think, as much as I have to complain about how Doge is being executed, including my current fear, which is is he just going to fire everyone but leave everything else in place, which would not actually be cutting government. It would just be making everything not work while still taking the money for it and spending the money for it. I don't love that, but I do like the idea that the U.S. could be following in Argentina's footsteps in some kind of way.
Yeah, and not just for shitty music. The musicals, the Broadway musicals about America generally are better than the ones about Argentina.
I love Evita. Don't talk smack about Evita.
It's the Che Guevara character in there who's too much of a uncomplicated Greek chorus that gets my goat all the time. But
even the Madonna movie version, I think, had its moments. I'm just going to stand by that.
Argentina. Yeah, I like Doge too in concept, and so far kind of in execution. There are things, and I think you and I might disagree about this a bit, but I'm not an anarchist. I think there are things the government does that are good. There's some things that USAID, which has really taken it on the chin. Some of the stuff that they fund is good. A lot of it is awful, and I like the broad picture of saying to, both people who are working in the government, but also just the American people, do you really need all of these people to be doing everything that they say? And, when Trump, and I guess this is somewhat related, when he is now the leader of the Kennedy Center. And when, if your answer to Trump or the federal government saying, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, is to be but this is how I make my living, that's not good enough. And NPR had a very funny headline where, a bunch of people protesting Trump taking over the kind of leadership role at the Kennedy Center was to do a dance protest. And it's that might work in in another musical, Newsies or Swing Kids or something like that, but it's not going to work. And you see, I've seen countless people who work at national parks or elsewhere saying, this was my dream to be a park ranger, and now I can't do it. It's that's not a good enough reason to say to taxpayers, we are going to be spending $7 trillion on a federal budget forever and ever. I join with you in being very nervous about the outcome because, again, Trump is a liar. He's either a liar or he just doesn't have good facts. But, there have been cases where Doge has said they've canceled contracts worth $8 billion for certain types of ICE stuff. And it turned out it was $8 million, or rather for Politico subscriptions, things like that. The details really matter. And I know Alex Tabarrok at Marginal Revolution had a really good piece about how, if you fire people at the FDA without actually changing what the FDA has the legal ability to do, all you're going to do is slow down drug approval and information stuff even more, like you were saying. And that, to me, can we get to that place where we're cutting the government and we're cutting it in a way that's actually effective rather than, just kind of a guttural impulse?
You and I are old enough to remember the moment when the rebuttal to every libertarian or anarchist proposal was, oh, so you want to have Somalia? You remember that?
Yeah. Who builds the roads in Somalia? Right?
Who builds the roads? Yeah. And I was thinking when you were talking about the Kennedy Center, Trump is doing the Somali pirate, I'm the captain now.
I'm the captain now.
That's not what we want. That's not the thing that we were looking for. That's not what we mean by small government. It's not what we mean by freedom. Well, we've certainly said a lot of negative things in our best things. So let's just go ahead and do the negative things. What is your pick for the worst thing that Trump has done so far?
The worst thing is his kind of immigration priorities. And, again, this is something that he ran on and he's delivering on. Not quite the mass deportations yet, but we might be getting there. But he said he was going to deport illegal immigrants, particularly violent criminals. We're barely a month in and he's already kind of run out of violent criminals that are queuing up to be sent back to places. And instead he's doing stuff like attempting to repeal the temporary protected status of Haitian immigrants, which could mean that over 500,000 people overnight with the stroke of a pen suddenly go from being legal to being illegal. That's bad policy for a million different reasons. And he's also done stuff like ICE agents have gone to border towns in Texas, and they're arresting people, illegal workers in a bakery. So like instead of going after MS-13, we're going after muffin makers. And like that's just, that's stupid and wrong. Like we need a good, predictable, immigration policy where people who want to come here and live and work legally, who are vetted and who are going to contribute to society, both as producers and consumers, are allowed to come. And instead, we're getting this very nasty, ugly idea that all illegal immigrants and possibly even legal immigrants, in the case of these Haitians and other people, just need, they don't really belong here, so let's get rid of them. That, to me, the immigration issue was my biggest reservation about a Trump second term, and it remains one so far.
I just had this like horrible vision of an ICE agent with someone up against the wall going, "Do you know the Muffin Man?
Do you know the Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man."
Yes, I know the Muffin Man.
Like something about muffins is.
I mean, if you're rounding up illegal immigrants at a workplace in an economy where we have rates of unemployment that are below what economists think of as frictional unemployment, like you're doing something wrong, right? Like you should never, in America of all countries, you shouldn't be pulling people out of the workplace and throwing them into jail or on a plane to go back to Venezuela. This is another thing. Venezuelans who are coming here, who are fleeing a socialist country, come to America and they go through ports of entry and they apply for refugee status or asylee status, and they are being rounded up and flown back to Venezuela via Honduras. So it's like, what kind of message are we sending when we say, with people fleeing socialism, don't bother. You're not welcome in America. That's not a good look.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, call me open borders, but I do just think in general, like you also don't have to be fleeing socialism. Like people should be able to come here just because they're like, yo, I heard you have bakeries that have jobs. Like that's enough. Yeah. And, I think the motivating factor behind Trump centering this in his campaign, which is totally understandable, is how things are going at the border. To me, that's a problem produced by government, and it's a problem that government can solve and doesn't have to solve in anyone's bakery. Okay, so my pick for worst is just the loosey-goosey use of emergency powers.
Yeah.
Like everything isn't an emergency. It cannot be true that we are simultaneously experiencing emergencies on the scale that we simply can't do normal policymaking in energy production and border security and trade relations and this and that. We have a long, proud tradition in this country of declaring emergencies and then never undeclaring them. Right. We've talked about that on the Reason Roundtable a bunch of times, but I keep thinking about that phrase, I think about this phrase a lot in my day-to-day work at Reason Magazine, but also in this case that a failure to plan on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. Right. And it's like, everyone's like, oh no, this is a mess. It's an emergency. And it's like, you did this. You fix it. You do not get special powers to fix it after you screwed up solving this problem for a decade or more already. They're just core issues that we need to make policy on. They're not emergencies. No one gets special treatment. And Trump is behaving the exact opposite of that.
I mean, the one positive move, or it's the beginning of a plan to address some of this, is, our actions by people like Rand Paul, who are talking about, okay, we're actually going to vote on rescission, on like ending spending. Like Congress needs to step up. This is like a really, tired refrain that we've been saying literally now for decades. But, Congress needs to assert itself, because at this point, everything is going through the executive office and then it ends up at the Supreme Court or somewhere in the federal judiciary. Congress, Elon Musk asked federal workers to, send out an email with 5 points of what you did last week. Maybe he should have started with, the Senate and the House of Representatives, because these are people who are not doing anything other than flapping their gums about how much they love or hate Trump. But they're just, they've got to do the work, I think. And that will be the real game changer, hopefully in a better direction.
What would you say you do here?
Nick, do you want to make any predictions about what the next month might hold, given that we're only a month in and all this has already happened?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was talking with people over the weekend of like, December 2024 seems like a lifetime ago. And I get that it's a kind of interesting governing strategy. I don't think it's sustainable and I don't think it's good, but it's happening. What I am most worried about coming like down the road, or just in general, what has, where Trump, I think, is very mediocre so far, is that the way in which he's signing on to existing kind of attitudes in the government. And so like his FCC head, as well as his FTC policy people, seem to be doing exactly what Biden, or in the case of the FCC, being more interventionist, but they're not pro-business. They're not free enterprise. They're not saying, okay, you know what? We were suffering under this giant, weighted security blanket thrown over the economy by Biden and COVID. They're not pulling that back. They're just kind of extending it. So that worries me a lot.
Yeah, I would say on the flip side, the ways in which he hasn't conformed to the status quo, especially in foreign policy, that feels like where we're headed for the next couple months. You never know, because Trump. But it seems like I'm going to broker an end to the war in Ukraine without involving Ukraine is like a project that might be consuming for the next couple weeks in a way that might not be entirely positive for the world. Sweet baby Jesus, it has only been a month. If you enjoyed this, check us out at the Reason Roundtable podcast. New episodes every Monday. Bye.